Welcome back, boys and girls. We are going to finish Chapter 5 of Little House on the Prairie, and Chapter 5 is called House on the Prairie. We left off on page 60, and we left off at the end of the second paragraph, right where Ma had the log fall on her foot. And remember, Pa's feeling her foot now to see if there's any broken bones. "Move your arms," he said. "Is your back hurt? Can you turn your head?" Ma moved her arms and turned her head. "Thank God," Pa said. He helped Ma to sit up. She said again, "I'm all right, Charles. It's just my foot." Quickly, Pa took off her shoe and stocking. He felt her foot all over, moving the ankle and the instep and every toe. "Does it hurt much?" he asked. Ma's face was gray and her mouth was a tight line. "Not much," she said. "No bones broken," said Pa. "It's only a bad sprain." Ma said cheerfully, "Well, a sprain's soon mended. Don't be upset, Charles." "I blame myself," said Pa. "I should have used skids." And what he means by that is he should have used boards that he could have, or logs that he could have rolled up the logs to the top of the house instead of having Ma help lift them. He helped Ma to the tent. He built up the fire and heated water. When the water was as hot as Ma could bear, she put her swollen foot into it. It was providential that the foot was not crushed. Only a little hollow in the ground had saved it. Pa kept pouring more hot water into the tub, in which Ma's foot was soaking. Her foot was red from the heat, and the puffed ankle began to turn purple. Ma took her foot out of the water and bound strips of rag tightly around it, and around the ankle. "I can manage," she said. She could not get her shoe on, but she tied more rags around her foot, and she hobbled on it. She got supper as usual, only a little more slowly. But Pa said she could not help to build the house until her ankle was well. Can you imagine, boys and girls? Picture in your mind Ma's foot. It's not a pleasant thought, is it? He hewed out skids. These were long, flat slabs. One end rested on the ground, and the other end rested on the log wall. He was not going to lift any more logs. He and Ma would roll them up these skids. So basically the skids are like ramps that Pa can roll the logs up to the top of the house with. "It's okay, baby Susan. Ma's going to be okay." But Ma's ankle was not well yet. When she unwrapped it in the evenings to soak it in hot water, it was all purple and black and green and yellow. The house must wait. Then one afternoon, Pa came merrily whistling up the creek road. They had not expected him home from hunting so soon. As soon as he saw them, he shouted, "Good news!" Now, Ma, here's a picture of Ma, so you can see how swollen or how big her ankle is compared to her other one. And you can see it's very, very bruised. That's this discoloration here. They had a neighbor only 2 miles away on the other side of the creek. Pa had met him in the woods. They were going to trade work, and that would make it easier for everyone. "He's a bachelor," said Pa, "and he says he can get along without a house better than you and the girls can. So he's going to help me first. And then as soon as he gets his log ready, I'll go and help him." Now, this neighbor that Pa met, is a bachelor. And a bachelor, it simply means it's a man who's not married. They need not wait any longer for the house. That was a tongue twister. And Ma need not do any more work on it. "How do you like that, Caroline?" Pa asked joyfully. And Ma said, "That's good, Charles. I'm glad." She's not real excited because her foot hurts so bad. Early next morning, Mr. Edwards came. He was lean and tall and brown. He bowed to Ma and called her ma'am, politely. But he told Laura that he was a wildcat from Tennessee. He wore tall boots and a ragged jumper and a coonskin cap. And he could spit tobacco juice farther than Laura had ever imagined that anyone could spit tobacco juice. He could hit anything he spit at, too. Laura tried and tried, but she could never spit so far or as well as Mr. Edwards could. So their neighbor is Mr. Edwards, and he comes from the state of Tennessee. And just like he told Laura, he's a wildcat from Tennessee who spits tobacco juice. He was a fast worker, and one day he and Pa built those walls as high as Pa wanted them. They joked and sang while they worked, and their axes made the chips fly. On top of the walls they set up a skeleton roof of slender poles. Then in the south wall they cut a tall hole for a door, and in the west wall and in the east wall they cut square holes for windows. Laura couldn't wait to see the inside of the house. As soon as the tall hole was cut, she ran inside. Everything was striped there. Stripes of sunshine came through the cracks in the west wall, and stripes of shadow came down from the poles overhead. The stripes of shade and sunshine were all across Laura's hands, and her arms and her bare feet, and through the cracks between the logs she could see the stripes of prairie. The sweet smell of the prairie mixed with the sweet smell of cut wood. Then, as Pa cut away the logs to make the window hole in the west wall, chunks of sunshine came in. When he finished, a big block of sunshine lay on the ground inside the house. Around the door hole and the window holes, Pa and Mr. Edwards nailed thin slabs against the cut ends of the logs, and the house was finished, all but the roof. The walls were solid and the house was large, much larger than a tent. It was a nice house. Mr. Edwards said he would go home now, but Pa and Ma said he must stay to supper. Ma had cooked an especially good supper because they had company. There was stewed jackrabbit with white flour dumplings and plenty of gravy. There was a steaming hot, thick cornbread flavored with bacon fat. There was molasses to eat on the cornbread. But because this was a company supper, they did not sweeten their coffee with molasses. Ma brought out the little paper sack of pale brown store sugar. Mr. Edwards said he surely did appreciate that supper. Then Pa brought out his fiddle. Mr. Edwards stretched out on the ground to listen. But first Pa played for Laura and Mary. He played their very favorite song, and he sang it. Laura liked it best of all because Pa's voice went down deeper in the song. Oh, I am a gypsy king. I come and go as I please. I pull my old nightcap down and take the world at my ease. Then his voice went down deeper than the very oldest bullfrogs. Oh, I am a gypsy king. They all laughed. Laura could hardly stop laughing. Oh, sing it again, Pa, sing it again, she cried, before she remembered that children must be seen and not heard. Then she was quiet. Remember we learned about that, boys and girls, back in these days. Children were to be seen, but not heard. Pa went on playing, and everything began to dance. Mr. Edwards rose up on one elbow. Then he sat up. Then he jumped up and danced. He danced like a jumping jack in the moonlight, while Pa's fiddle kept on rollicking, and his foot kept tapping, and Laura's hand and Mary's hands were clapping together, and their feet were patting too. So here's a picture of Pa playing the fiddle, Mary and Laura with their hands clapping, and there's that wild cat from Tennessee, Mr. Edwards, dancing. And here you can see, boys and girls, here's the door that Pa and Mr. Edwards cut in the house, the window, and the skeleton roof that they're talking about. See, it's a skeleton because there's no shingles on it. There's no skin on it, basically. "You're the fiddlin'est fool I ever did see," Mr. Edwards shouted admirably to Pa. "He didn't stop dancing. Pa didn't stop playing. He played Money Musk and Arkansas Traveler, Irish Washerwoman and the Devil's Hornpipe. Baby Carrie couldn't sleep in all that music. She sat up in Ma's lap looking at Mr. Edward with round eyes and clapping her little hands and laughing. Even the firelight danced, and all around its edge the shadows were dancing. Only the new house stood still and quiet in the dark till the big moon rose and shone on its gray walls and the yellow chips around it. Mr. Edwards said he must go. It was a long way back to his camp on the other side of the woods and the creek. He took his gun and said good night to Laura and Mary and Ma. He said a bachelor got mighty lonesome, and he surely had enjoyed this evening of home life. "Play, Ingalls," he said. "Play me down the road." So while he went down the road and out of sight, Pa played and Pa played, and Pa and Mr. Edwards and Laura sang with all their might. Old Dan Tucker was a fine old man. He washed his face in the frying pan. He combed his hair with a wagon wheel and died of a toothache in his heel. Get out of the way for old Dan Tucker. He's too late to get his supper. Supper's over and the dish is washed. Nothing left but a piece of squash. Old Dan Tucker went to town, riding a mule, leading a hound. Far over the prairie rang Pa's big voice and Laura's little one, and faintly from the creek bottoms came a last whoop from Mr. Edwards. Get out of the way for old Dan Tucker. He's too late to get his supper. When Pa's fiddle stopped, they could not hear Mr. Edwards any more. Only the wind rustled in the prairie grasses. The big yellow moon was sailing high overhead. The sky was so full of light that not one star twinkled in it, and all the prairie was a shallowy mellowness. Then from the woods by the creek a nightingale began to sing. Everything was silent, listening to the nightingale's song. The birds sang on and on. The cool wind moved over the prairie, and the song was round and clear above the grasses whispering. The sky was like a bowl of light overturned on the black, flat land. The song ended. No one moved or spoke. Laura and Mary were quiet. Pa and Ma sat motionless. Only the wind stirred and the grasses sighed. Then Pa lifted the fiddle to his shoulder and softly touched the bow to the strings. A few notes fell like clear drops of water into the stillness. A pause, and Pa began to play the nightingale's song. The nightingale answered him. The nightingale began to sing again. It was singing with Pa's fiddle. When the strings were silent, the nightingale went on singing. When it paused, the fiddle came to it and sang again. The bird and the fiddle were talking to each other in the cool night under the moon. Oh, baby Susan woke up a little when she heard about that wild cat from Tennessee, and she heard him dancing and heard Pa's fiddle playing. She woke up and had to watch it. It's okay, baby Susan. You can just fall asleep to the nightingale song. And that's the end of chapter 5, boys and girls. Tomorrow we'll read chapter 6, Moving In.